in summer weather, morns that pass by, and fair eves that fly. Come buy, our grapes fresh from the vine, pomegranates full and fine, dates and sharp bullaces, rare pears and green gages, damsons and bilberries, taste them and try. Currants and gooseberries, bright fire-like barberries, figs to fill your mouth, citrons from the south, sweet to tongue and sound to eye. Come buy, come buy. Evening by evening, among the brook side rushes, Laura bowed her head to hear. Lizzie veiled her blushes, crouching close together in the cooling weather, with clasping arms and cautioning lips, with tingling cheeks and fingertips. Lie close, Laura said, pricking up her golden head. We must not look at goblin men. We must not buy their fruits. Who knows what soil they fed, their hungry, thirsty roots? Come buy, called the goblins, hobbling down by the glen. Oh, cried Lizzie, Laura, Laura, you should not peep at goblin men. Lizzie covered up her eyes, covered and closed, lest they should look. Laura reared her glossy head and whispered like the restless brook. Look, Lizzie, look! Down the glen tramped little men. One holds a basket and one bears a plate. One lugs a golden dish of many pounds weight. How fair the vine must grow, whose grapes are so luscious. How warm the wind must blow through those fruit bushes. No, said Lizzie, no, no, no. Their offerings should not charm us. Their evil gifts would harm us. She thrust a dimpled finger in each ear and shut her eyes and ran. Curious Laura chose to linger, wondering at each merchant man. One had a cat's face, one whisked a tail, one crawled like a snail, and one tramped at a rat's pace. One like a wombat prowled obtruse and furry, one like a rattle tumbled hurry scurry. She heard a voice like voice of doves, cooing all together. They sounded kind and full of loves in the pleasant weather. Laura stretched her gleaming neck like a rush-embedded swan, like a lily from the beck, like a moonlight poplar branch, like a vessel at the launch when its last restraint has gone. Backwards up the mossy glen turned and trooped the goblin men with their shrill repeated cry, come buy, come buy. Where they reached where Laura was, they stood stock still upon the moss, leering at each other, brother with queer brother, signaling each other, brother with sly brother. One set his basket down, one reared his plate, one began to weave a crown of tendrils, leaves, and rough nuts brown. Men sell not such in any town. One heaved the golden weight of dish and fruit to offer her. Come buy, was still their cry. Laura stared but did not stir, longed but had no money. The whisk-tail merchant bade her taste, in tones as smooth as honey. The cat-face purred, the rat-face spoke a word of welcome, and the snail piece was even heard. One parrot-voiced and jolly cried, pretty goblin, still for pretty goblin, for pretty Polly. One whistled like a bird, but sweet-toothed Laura spoke in haste. Good folk, I have no coin, to take were to purloin. I have no copper in my purse, I have no silver either, and all my gold is on the firs that shake in windy weather above the resty heather. You have much gold upon your head, they all answered together. Buy with us from a golden girl. She clipped a precious golden lock and dropped a tear more rare than pearl, then sucked their fruit globes fairer red, sweeter than honey from the rock, stronger than man rejoicing wine, clearer than water flowed that juice. She never tasted such before. How would it cloy with such length of use? She sucked and sucked and sucked the more, fruits which that unknown orchard bore. She sucked until her lips were sore, then flung the empty rinds away, but gathered up one kernel stone, and knew not was it night or day, as she turned home alone. Lizzie met her at the gate, full of wise upbraidings. Dear, you should not stay so late. Twilight is not good for maidens. Should not loiter in the glen, in the haunts of goblin men. Do you not remember Jeanie, how she met them in the moonlight, took their gifts both choice and many, ate their fruits and wore their flowers, plucked from bowers where summer ripens at all hours? But ever in the moonlight she pined and pined away, and then fell with first snow, while to this day no grass will grow where she lies low. I planted daisies there a year ago that never blow. You should not loiter so. Nay, hush, said Laura, nay, hush, my sister. I ate and ate my fill, and yet my mouth waters still. Tomorrow night I will buy more. And kissed her. Have done with sorrow. I'll bring you plums tomorrow, fresh on their mother twigs, cherries worth getting. You cannot think what figs my teeth have met in, what melons icy cold, piled on a dish of gold, too huge for me to hold. What peaches with a velvet nap, placid grapes without one seed. Odorous indeed must be the mead, whereon they grow, and pure the wave they drink, with lilies at the brink, and their sugar sweet, their sap. Golden head by golden head, like two pigeons in one nest. Folded in each other's wings, they lay down in their curtain bed, like two blossoms on one stem, like two flakes of new fallen snow, like two wands of ivory tipped with gold for awful kings. Moon and stars gazed in at them. Wind sang to them a lullaby. Lumbering owls forbore to fly. Not a bat flapped to and fro round their rest, cheek to cheek and breast to breast, locked together in one nest. Early in the morning, when the first cock crowed his warning, neat like bees and sweet and busy, Laura and Lizzie rose, fetched in honey, milked the cows, aired and set to rights the house, kneaded cakes of whitest wheat for dainty mouths to eat, next churned butter, whipped up cream, fed their poultry, sat and sewed, talked as modern maidens should, Lizzie with an open heart, Laura in an absent dream. One content, one sick in part, one warbling for the mere bright daylight, one longing for the night. At length, slow evening came. They went with pitchers to the reedy brook, Lizzie most placid, and her look, Laura most like a leaping flame. They drew the gargling water from its deep. Lizzie plucked purple and rich golden flags, then turning homeward said, The sunset flushes those farthest lofty crags. Come, Laura, not another maiden lags. No wilful squirrel wags. The beasts and birds are fast asleep. But Laura loitered still among the rushes, and said the bank was steep, and said the hour was still early, dew not falling, the wind not chill, listening ever, but not catching the customary cry. Come by, was its iterated jingle, of sugar-baited words, not for all her watching. Once discerned even one goblin, racing, whisking, tumbling, hobbling, let alone the herds that used to tramp along the glen, in groups and singles of brisk fruit merchant men, till Lizzie urged, Laura, come, I hear the fruit call, but I dare not look. You should not loiter any longer at this brook. Come with me home. The stars rise, and the moon bends her arc. Each glowworm winks her spark. Let us get home before the night grows dark, for clouds may gather through this summer weather, Put out the lights and drench us though, as if we lost our way. What should we do? Laura turned, cold as stone, to find her sister had heard that cry alone, that goblin cry, "Come buy our fruits, come buy." Must she then buy no more such dainty fruit? Must she no more such succulous pasture find? Gone deaf and blind, her tree of life drooped from the root. She said not word in her heart's sore ache, but peered through the dimness, not discerning, trudged home, her pitcher dripping all the way. So crept to bed and lay, silent till Lizzie slept, and then sat up in a passionate yearning, and gnashed her teeth for balked desire, and wept as if her heart would break. Day after day, night after night, Laura kept watch in vain, in sullen silence and exceeding pain. She never caught that goblin cry, "Come buy, come buy." She never spied the goblin men, hawking their fruits along the glen. But when the moon waxed bright, her hair grew thin and grey. She dwindled as the fair moon doth turn, so to swift decay and burn her fire away. One day, remembering her kernel stone, she set it by the wall that faced the south, dewed it with tears, and hoped for a root, watched for a waxing shoot. But there came none. It never saw the sun. It never felt the trickling moisture run, while with sunk eyes and faded mouth she dreamed of melons as a traveler sees, false waves in a desert roof, with shade of leaf-crowned trees, and burns the thirstier in a sandful breeze. She no more swept the house, tended the fowls or cows, fetched honey-kneaded cakes of wheat, brought water from the brook, but sat down listless in the chimney nook, and would not eat. Tender Lizzie could not bear to watch her sister's cantankerous care, yet not to share. She night and morning caught the goblin's cry, "Come buy our orchard fruits, come buy, come buy." Beside the brook, along the glen, she heard the tramp of goblin men. And yoke and stir poor Laura could not hear, longed to buy the fruit to comfort her, but feared to pay too dear. She thought of Jeanie in her grave, who should have been a bride, but for who the joys of brides hope to have, fell sick and died. In her gay prime, in her earliest winter time, with the first blazing rime, with the first snowfall of crisp winter time, till Laura dwindling seemed knocking at death's door. Then Lizzie weighed no more. Better and worse, she put a silver penny in her purse, kissed Laura, and crossed the heath with clumps of firs, and at twilight halted by the brook. And for the first time in her life, she began to listen and look. Laughed every goblin when they spied her peeping, came towards her hobbling, flying, running, leaping, puffing and blowing, clucking and clapping and crowing, and mopping and mowing, full of airs and graces, pulling wry faces, demure grimaces, cat-like and rat-like, and rattle and wombat-like, snail-paced in a hurry, parrot-voiced and whistler, helter-skelter, hurry-scurry, clattering like magpies, fluttering like pigeons, gliding like fishes, hugged her and kissed her, squeezed her and caressed her, stretched up their dishes, panniers and plates, look at our apples, russet and doon, bob at our cherries, bite at our peaches, citrons and dates, grapes for the asking, pears red with basking out in the sun, plums on their twigs, pluck them and suck them, pomegranates, figs. Good folk, said Lizzie, mindful of Jeanie. Give me much and many, held out her apron, tossed them her penny. Nay, nay, take a seat with us, honor and eat with us, they answered grinning. Our feast is but beginning. Night yet is early, warm and dew pearly. Wakeful and starry, such fruit as these no man can carry. Half their bloom would fly, half their dew would dry. Half their flavor would pass by. Sit down and feast with us. Be welcome guest with us. Cheer you and rest with us. Thank you, said Lizzie, but one waits at home alone for me. So without further parleying, if you will not sell me any for your fruits, though much and many, give me back my silver penny I tossed you for a fee. They began to scratch their pates, no longer wagging, purring, but visibly demurring, grunting and snarling. One called her proud, and one called her cross-grained and uncivil. Their tones waxed loud. Their looks were evil, lashing their tails. They trod and hustled her, elbowed and jostled her, clawed her with their nails, barking, mewing, hissing, mocking, tore her gown and soiled her stockings, twitched her hair out by the roots, stamped upon her tender feet, held her hands and squeezed their fruits against her mouth to make her eat. White and golden Lizzie stood, like a lily in the flood, like a rock of blue-veined stone, lashed tidily, ostentorously, like a beacon left alone in a hoary roaring sea, sending up a golden fire like a fruit-crowned orange tree, white with blossoms and honey sweet, sore beast beset by wasp and bee, like a royal virgin town, topped with gilded dome and spire, close beleaguered by a fleet mad to tug her standard down. One may lead a horse to water, 20 cannot make him drink. Though the goblins cuffed and caught her, coaxed and fought her, bullied and besought her, scratched her and pinched her black as ink, kicked her and knocked her, mauled her and mocked her, Lizzie uttered not a word, would not open lip from lip, lest they should cram a mouthful in, but laughed in heart to feel the drip of juice that syruped all her face, and lodged in dimples of her chin, and streaked in her neck, which quaked like curd. At last the evil people, worn out by her resistance, flung back her penny and kicked their fruit along whichever road they took, not leaving root or stone or shoot. Some withered into the ground, some dived into the brook with ripple and ring, some scudded on the gale without sound, some vanished in the distance. In a smart ache tingle, Lizzie went her way, knew not was it night or day, sprang up the bank, tore through the furze, threaded copse and dingle, and heard her penny jingle, bouncing in her purse. Its bounce was music to her ear. She ran and ran, as if she feared some goblin man dogged her with gibe or curse, or something worse. But not one goblin scurried after, nor was she pricked by fear. The kind of heart made her windy paste, that urged her home quite out of breath with haste and inward laughter. She cried, "Laura, up in the garden, did you miss me? Come and kiss me. Never mind my bruises. Hug me, kiss me, suck my juices, squeeze from goblin fruits for you. Goblin pulp from goblin dew. Eat me, drink me, love me. Laura, make much of me. For your sake, I have braved the glen, and have had to do with goblin merchant men." Laura started from her chair, flung her arms in the air, clutched her hair. "Lizzie, Lizzie, have you tasted, for my sake, the fruit forbidden? Must your light like mine be hidden? Your young life like mine be wasted? Undone in mine undoing, and ruined in my ruin?" Thirsty, cankered, goblin-ridden, she clung about her sister, and kissed and kissed and kissed her, Tears once again refreshed her shrunken eyes, dropping like the rain after long sultry drought. Shaking with anguish, fear, and pain, she kissed and kissed with her hungry mouth. Her lips began to scorch. That juice was warmer to her tongue. She loathed the feast, withering as one possesses. She leaped and sung, rent all her robe and wrung her hands in lamentable haste, and beat her breast. Her locks streamed like a torch, borne by a racer at full speed, or like the mane of horses in their flight, or like an eagle as she steams the light. Straight towards the sun, or like a freed caged thing, or like a flying flag when armies run. Swift fire spread through her veins and knocked at her heart, met the fire smouldering there, and overbore its lesser flame. She gorged on bitterness without a name. Ah, fool, to choose such part of soul-consuming care, sense failed in the mortal strife, like the watchtower of a town, which an earthquake shatters down, like lightning-stricken mast, like a wind-uprooted tree, spun about like a foam-topped waterspout, cast down headlong in the sea, and she fell at last. Pleasure past and anguish past. Is it life or is it death? Life out of death, that night long Lizzie watched by her, counted her pulses' flagging stir, felt for her breath, held water to her lips, and cooled her face with tears and fanning leaves. But when the first birds chirped about their eaves, and early reapers plodded to the place of golden sheaves and dew-wet grass, bowed in the morning winds so brisk to pass, and new buds with new day opened up a cup like lilies by the stream, Laura woke as if from a dream, laughed in the innocent old way, hugged Lizzie, but not twice or thrice. Her gleaming locks shone not one thread of gray. Her breath was as sweet as May, and light danced in her eyes. Days, weeks, months, years afterwards, when both were wives, with children of their own, their mother hearts beset with fears, their lives bound up in tender lies, Laura would call the little ones and tell them of her early prime, those pleasant days long gone, if not returning time, would talk about the haunted glen, the wicked, quaint fruit merchant men, their fruits like honey to the throat, but poison in the blood. Men sell not such in any time. Would tell them how her sister stood in deadly peril to do her good and win the fiery antidote. Then joining hands in little hands would bid them cling together, for there is no friend like a sister in calm or stormy weather, to cheer one in a tedious way, to fetch one if one goes astray, to lift one if one totters down, to strengthen whilst one stands. The end.
The Sands of Dee by Charles Kingsley. O Mary, go and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home, and call the cattle home across the sands of Dee. The western wind was wild and dark with foam, and all alone went she. The western tide crept up the sand, and o'er the sand, and round the sand, as far as eye could see. The rolling mist came down and hid the land, and never home came she. Was it weed, or fish, or floating hair, a tress of golden hair, a drowned maiden's hair, above the nets at sea? Was never salmon yet that shone so fair among the stakes at Dee. They rowed her in across the rolling foam, the cruel crawling foam, the cruel hungry foam, to her grave beside the sea. But still the boatmen hear her call the cattle home across the sands of Dee. For those who do not know it, this library is haunted. There's a spirit that lives here. The spirit of one Edith Kaufman, a librarian whom some who've lived in this town have known for many years, or knew for many years. Now, tonight, we're going to maybe try and communicate with Miss Kaufman, or maybe another spirit, one never knows, which is why we had our protective spell earlier. This is a very Victorian thing to try and do. And as part of what we're going to try and do, I'm going to need someone to hold on to this small slip of paper. Someone trustworthy, who won't look, who will not merely be fazed by the fact that I sent you an entire basket of wonderful red wine that hopefully has bribed you to make sure that that says exactly what I say it says, correct?
I don't like wine, but...
Darn it! Knew it wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Oh.
It was a valiant effort.
Okay, it was a valiant effort.
I'll
All
avoid
right,
looking just to give you points.
So, go ahead and hold on to that. We're going to need that in a few minutes. Now, I'm going to need a volunteer here. One of the things that we like to do for our Victorian Fright sessions is to demonstrate some magic that would have been in place in the Victorian times. So, let's see. Sir, would you be willing to be my volunteer? You don't have to do anything complicated, I promise. You can come on. Now, this is an ordinary copy of Dean Kootz's Midnight. Thought it was appropriate. Go ahead and take a look at it. Make sure it's just an ordinary book. Mm-hmm. Nothing strange about it whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Now, please, go ahead and tell me when to stop.
Okay.
Okay. Now, go ahead and, without telling me, go ahead and look at those last three words on the page, on this page over here. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I missed something. Hang on. Okay, let's try that again, one more time. I am not a professional magician, for those who would like to know. Okay, let's try this now. All right, tell me when to stop.
Okay.
All right, last three words on this page. Go ahead and write them down. I'll hold the book. I will look this way so I cannot see what you are writing.
Okay.
Okay, now go ahead and you can have this book, and go ahead and take that back to your seat. Thank you. Now, in the Victorian time, it was believed that people had powers. The great magician, Houdini, was always asked one particular question. He was asked when he gained his powers. Not when did he learn to perform his tricks. When did he learn that he had these amazing powers? Now, I can tell you that for me, the time that I first learned that I could perform any sort of magic whatsoever was on the 1st of July. Now, I happen to know that it was at 9 p.m. because it suddenly occurred to me that I knew how to perform a particular magic trick that I had seen performed by somebody else. And that was the day that I realized I had the power to be an amateur, shall we say, in the realm of magic. It's a very, very memorable day. 1st of July, 9 p.m. Realized how to perform a magic trick that I had seen. It involved some cards. Now, young lady, come on up. Oh, the one behind you.
Okay.
Oh. I have here 3 cards. Now, the backs of these cards are all the same, I promise. Nothing special about them. But we are going to use the spirit of Edith Kaufman to try and identify one of these cards. Now, what I would like you to do is, without telling me, and without pointing to it, go ahead and just choose one of those cards in your mind. Focus on it. Okay, picture the card in your mind. Okay, now that you have chosen it, I am going to look away. And I would like you to take the two cards that you did not choose and exchange their places with each other. Can you do that? Very good. And then once you've done that, turn them all upside down. All right? Let me know when you have finished. Let's do this again. That was a practice round. You may choose the same or a different card. It does not matter to me. All right? So choose a different card. Have it in your mind. All right? Go ahead with the two that you did not pick, exchange their places. And now turn all three cards upside down. Now, I could tell you where your card is now, but that would be too easy. What I would like you to do is move these cards and shuffle them to exchange their positions, however you would like to do it. You sure you're done? All right. We should have had you show everybody what your card was. Yes, it was the 1st of July at 9 p.m. Is that your card? Now, I need one more assistant. And I need someone to bring my cart up from the back. Thank you very much. Now, let's see. Who should we pick? Young man, would you like to assist me? Sure. We are going to sort through these objects. And I know which one will be left at the end. I will show you how we'll sort through them. I'm going to choose two things, and you get to choose which of them will go away. So, for example, if I selected the stereopticon and these poker chips, which of them would you like to eliminate? Very well. Have you ever looked through one of these? Go ahead and look through. Point it at the light. What do you see?
I'm not quite sure.
Is it an outdoor scene? In 3 dimensions. So this is an early 3-dimensional viewer. We'll go ahead and eliminate that. Now, you get to pick 2 objects, and I will choose one. What are these 2? I feel like the skeleton of the piranha does not quite fit. How about you? Felix Felicis or the crystal ball? Crystal ball. See anything? Your turn. Go ahead and choose. That's a hard choice. The Sands of Time or the Lock? Your turn. Liquid luck. I feel like we could use that. But that would go away. Well, let's see. Book taken from a dead man's body, or the sealing implement. Choose. The sands of time shall depart. Shall we be left with the book or the poker choice? So the book is remaining, or the book is going? The book is going. Now, of course, there's only two objects left, but I feel like we should say goodbye to the game of the devil, leaving us with this. A six-sided object. What do you see on those sides? Numbers. Can you reveal what is on that slip of paper?
A box of chance.
Oh, wow.
Humor behind them. The words on your slip of paper. Humor behind them.
All counterfeit with.
What was the last three words?
Interesting.
Hmm?
Interesting. I see.
Page 179.
Am I correct?
Yep.
That's it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to take a short break. Please, there are refreshments back at the back of the room, and have a refill.
Let's see how.
It helps if you write down the right three words.
Did you do that on
You
purpose,
just gotta
Bill?
pick better help.
I wonder if he had his hand on there.
How do you get good help?
You know, that is a really hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do, to find good help. Good help is tricky. It's quite tricky. Now, the kids did a great job. Maybe it's but I felt like we should have an adult.
Is it back?
Yes, it is. But it's also a die.
Oh yeah, I see it. Camouflage.
What was the first trick you did?
The very first trick that I did?
Did here, yes.
It was the very first trick I did here was actually the very first one that I learned.
Was it?
Yes. So it was the one where I had members of the audience come up and walk past my cards, and then I was able to name every card they had selected as they walked by.
It didn't work.
One person intentionally chose a card that was not what you should have chosen. So it's a mentalism trick. You set out a set of cards, and you probably shouldn't reveal the secret, but you have 8 people come up, have them walk past your deck of cards. Each of them, as they walk by, independently chooses a card that they see among their set. The first one just grabs their eye, not the ones on the end. Just card in the middle grabs their eye. Very, the first one. Well, only some of those cards are actually invisible. So only some of them are actually options. Part number 1. Part number 2, I then name all 8 of your cards, all 8 people, and have them all state. Revealing, therefore, that I was able to determine the 8 different cards that you had all selected. But is there any evidence that you had 8 different cards?
I heard you.
It's a very simple trick. I saw it performed by a master magician in Essex. Yeah, I knew how he did it. The instant that he did it, and that was, I looked at my watch, and that's I know what time it was. When I first learned that I could do something, it has taken me 2-3 years to pick up 2 more of his tricks.
And then Bill
And then
messes
this
up.
one all messes it up. So yes, feel free to grab yourself some refreshments and
Is he out? Well, you didn't scare anybody. Put him right to sleep.
the little ones don't. They don't. They don't. They don't. Also, the first half of the evening we went like.
He had his bravery cap on.
Yeah.
The whole time. He was like, I'm going to be brave.
We're about to descend into.
I was considering mine. Did you even notice that she has red eyes? Red eyes.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, but
That's
those
cool.
are from
That's
It's harder.
cool.
It's harder. Okay, so they're black with like the red ones. That's really creepy how they black.
You did a great job. You did a great job. I've had adults mess up tricks. I'm just gonna keep reminding you. And of course, I know your wife will never look at it, so. That's your problem. Is that, I'm actually not sure the guy who I really talked to. I'm not sure how he did it. Because he had a whole I'm not sure how he did it, but I figured it out. Oh, for the Goblin Market? It's long. That is okay. The monkey is stupid. She thinks it's cute. No, yeah, the name of the monkey is Edgar. Liise is not the one who thinks it's cute. She thinks it's cute. I'm not sure that it's a doll.
Annabelle is from Annabelle, and Annabelle was this haunted doll that murdered her owners, and she kept going from owner to owner, and they kept dying. And she's actually a real doll, and she's kept in a glass case and
Dacia wants to go and break her out.
No.
But I'm willing to bet.
But my research is pretty much the screw, so I have.
Are you guys ready there? We're just about to start off with Macbeth.
You are, you're gonna have more?
Oh yeah. Well, that's only part of that's half one.
This is intermission.
This is the intermission. All right.
Is that cute?
Theater cue, right? That's our cue for. That's our warning. That's our cue. All right, Dacia, whenever you're ready.
Oh, yes, I need to set up.
I sure did come back to do it, aren't you?
Stand through.
I thought it was over.
I don't think it's great. I see how it is. Right.
Round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails throw. Toad, that under cold stone, days and nights had 31. Sweltered venom, sleeping got, boil thou first in the charmed pot. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Fillet of fenny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake. Eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blindworm sting, lizard's leg and howlet's wing. For a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth boil and bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Scale of tongue, tooth of wolf, witch's mummy, maw and gulf. Of the raven sea salt shark, root of hemlock digged in the dark. Liver of blaspheming Jew, gall of goat and slips of yew, silvered in the moon's eclipse, nose of Turk and Tartar's lips. Finger of birth strangled babe, ditch delivered by drabe. Make the cruel thick and slab, make the gruel, and thereto a tiger's chaldron for the ingredients of our cauldron. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
John Harkness's journal. From Dracula. May 12th. Let me begin with facts. Bare, meager facts. Verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experiences, which will have to rest on my own observation, or my memory of them. Last evening, when the Count came from his room, he began by asking me questions on legal matters and on the doing of certain kinds of business. When he had satisfied himself on these points of which he had spoken, and I had verified all as well as I could by the books available, he suddenly stood up and said, "Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins, or to any other?" It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not, that I had yet not seen any opportunity of sending letters to anybody. Then write now, my young friend, he said, laying a heavy hand on my shoulder. Write to our friend and to any other, and say, if it will please you, that you will stay with me until a month from now. Do you wish me to stay so long? I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. I desire it much. Nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have not stinted. Was it not so? What could I do but bow acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins' interest, not mine, and I had to think of him, not myself, and besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that in his eyes and in his bearing which made me remember that I was a prisoner, and that if I wished it, I could have no choice. The Count saw his victory in my bow, and his mastery in the trouble of my face, for he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourse of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so? As he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of notepaper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, and then at him, and noticing his quiet smile, and the sharp canine teeth lying under the red overlip, I understood, as well as if he had spoken, that I should be more careful what I wrote, for he would be able to read it. So I determined to write only formal notes from now on, but to write fully to Mr. Hawkins in secret, and also to Mina, for to her I could write shorthand, which would puzzle the Count if he were to see it. When I had written my 2 letters, I sat quietly, reading a book, whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring as he wrote them to some books on his table. Then he took up my 2 and placed them with his own, and put by his writing materials, after which, the instant the door closed behind him, I leaned over and looked at his letters, which were face down on the table. I felt no compunction in doing so under the circumstances. I felt that I should protect myself in every way I could. I was just about to open the letters when I saw the door handle move. I sank back in my seat, having just had time to resume my book before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand, entered the room. He took up the letters on the table, stamped them carefully, and then, turning to me, he said, I trust you will forgive me, but I have much work to do in private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish. At the door, he turned and, after a moment's pause, said, Let me advise you, my dear young friend. Nay, let me warn you, with all seriousness, that should you leave these rooms, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other part of the castle. It is old and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned. Should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then... He finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hands as if he were washing them. I quite understood. My only doubt was as to whether any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed to be closing around me. Next entry, later. I endorse the last words written, but this time there is no doubt in question. I shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. I have placed the crucifix over the head of my bed. I imagine that my rest is thus freer from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left me, I went to my room. and after a little while, not hearing any sound, I came out and went up the stone stair to where I could look out towards the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible though it was to me, as compared with the narrow darkness of the courtyard. Looking out on this, I felt that I was indeed in prison, and I seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though it were of the night. I'm beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on me. It is destroying my nerve. I start at my own shadow, and am full of all sorts of horrible imaginings. God knows that there is ground for my terrible fear in this accursed place. I looked out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight, till it was almost as lit as day. In the soft light, the distant hills became melted in the shadows of the valleys and gorges of velvety blackness. Mere beauty seemed to cheer me. There was peace and comfort in every breath I drew. As I leaned from the window, my eye was caught by something moving a story below me, and somewhat to my left, where I imagined, from the order of the rooms, that the windows of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which I stood was tall and deep, stone-mullioned, and though weather-worn, was still complete. But it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out from the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man by the neck and the movement of his back and arms, and in any case I could not mistake the hands which I had had many opportunities of studying. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over the dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first, I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow, but I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality, move downwards at considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. What manner of man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the semblance of a man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about with terrors that I dare not think of. Later, the morning of 16th of May. God preserve my sanity, for to this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, that I may not go mad, if indeed I be not mad already. If I be sane, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to me. That to him alone I can look for safety, even though this be only whilst I can serve his purpose. Great God, merciful God, let me be calm, for out of that way lies madness indeed. I begin to get new lights on certain things which have puzzled me. Up to now I never quite knew what Shakespeare meant when he made Hamlet say, "My tablets, quick, my tablets, 'tis meet that I put it down," etc. For now, feeling as though my own brain were as unhinged, or if the shock must come to an end in its undoing, I turned to my diary for repose. The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe me. The Count's mysterious warning frightened me at the time. It frightens me more now when I think of it, for in the future he has a fearful hold upon me. I shall fear to doubt what he may say. When I had written in my diary and had fortunately replaced the book and pen in my pocket, I felt sleepy. The Count's warning came into my mind, but I took pleasure in disobeying it. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with it, the obstinacy which sleep brings as outrider. The soft moonlight soothed and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed me. I determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunted rooms, but to sleep here, where of old ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives, while their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. I drew a great couch out of its place near the corner, so that as I lay I could look at the lovely view to the east and south, and, unthinking of and uncaring for the dust, compose myself for sleep. I suppose I must have fallen asleep. I hope so. But I fear, for all that followed was startlingly real, so real that now, sitting here in the broad, full sunlight of the morning, I cannot in the least believe that it was all sleep. I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I came into it. I could see along the floor in the brilliant moonlight my own footsteps, marked where I had disturbed the long accumulation of dust. In the moonlight opposite me, there were 3 young women. Ladies by their dress and manner. I thought at the time that I must be dreaming when I saw them, for they threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me and looked at me for some time and then whispered together. 2 were dark and had high, aquiline noses like the Count, and great, dark, piercing eyes that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The other was fair as can be, with great masses of golden hair and eyes like pale creatures and pale sapphires. I seemed somehow to know her face, and to know it in connection with some dreamy fear, but I could not recollect at the moment how or where. All 3 had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. There was something about them that made me uneasy, some longing, and at the same time some deadly fear. I felt in my heart a wicked, burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down, lest someday it should meet mine eyes and cause me pain, but it is the truth. They whispered together, and then they all 3 laughed, such a silvery, musical laugh, but as hard as though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable tingling sweetness of water glasses when played on by a cunning hand. The fair girl shook her head coquettishly, and the other 2 urged her on. One said, "Go on, you are the first, and we shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The other added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for all of us." I lay quiet, looking out from under my eyelashes in an agony of delightful anticipation. The fair girl advanced and bent over me till I could feel the movement of her breath upon me. Sweet it was in one sense, honey sweet, and sent the same tingling through the nerves as her voice, but with a bitter underlining the sweet, a bitter offensiveness as one smells in blood. I was afraid to raise my eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes. The girl went on her knees and bent over me, simply gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsive, and as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal. I could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on the scarlet lips and on the red tongue as it lapped the white, sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin and seemed to fasten on my throat. Then she paused, and I could hear the churning sound of her tongue as it licked her teeth and lips, and I could feel the hot breath on my neck. Then the skin of my throat began to tickle, then tingle, as one's flesh does when the hand that is to tickle it approaches nearer, nearer. I could feel the soft, shivering touch of the lips on the super-sensitive skin of my throat, and the hard dents of 2 sharp teeth just touching and pausing there. I closed my eyes in a languorous ecstasy and waited with beating heart. But at that instant another sensation swept through me as quick as lightning. I was conscious of the presence of the Count, and of his being as if lapped up in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened involuntarily, I saw his strong hand grasp the slender neck of the fair woman, and with giant's power draw it back. The blue eyes transformed with fury, the white teeth champing with rage, and the fair cheeks blazing red with passion. But the Count, never did I imagine such wrath and fury. Even among the demons of the pit, his eyes were positively blazing. The red light in them was lurid, as if the flames of hellfire burned behind them. His face was deathly pale, and the lines of it were like hard, drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white-hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him, and then motioned to the others, as if he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that I had seen used on the wolves. And in a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and then ring in the room, he said, "How dare you touch him? Any of you? How dare you cast your eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you'll have to deal with me." The fair girl, with a laugh of ribald coquetry, turned to answer him, "You never loved yourself. You never loved." On this, the other woman joined, and such a mirthless, hard, soulless laughter rang through the room that it almost made me faint to hear. It seemed like the pleasure of fiends. Then the Count turned after looking at my face attentively and said in a soft whisper, "Yes, I too can love. You yourselves can tell it from the past. Is it not so? Well, now I promise you that when I am done with him, you shall kiss him at your will. Now go! Go! I must awaken him, for there is work to be done." "Are we to have nothing tonight?" said one of them. And with a low laugh, she pointed to the bag which he had thrown upon the floor, and which moved as though there were some living thing inside it. For answer, he just nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If my ears did not deceive me, there was a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The women closed round, whilst I was aghast with horror. But as I looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them, and they could not have passed me without my noticing. They simply seemed to fade into the rays of the moonlight and pass out through the window, for I could see outside the dim, shadowy forms for a moment before they entirely faded away. Then the horror overcame me, and I sank down into unconsciousness. Our next piece is Dole, the King's Daughter, by... Who wrote Dole, the King's Daughter? Oscar Wilde.
Dole of the King's Daughter. 7 stars in the still water, and 7 in the sky. 7 sins on the King's daughter, deep in her soul to lie. Red roses at her feet, red roses are red in her red gold hair. Oh, where her bosom and girdle meet, red roses are hidden there. Fair is the knight who lieth slain amid the rush and reed. See the lean fishes that are fain upon dead men to feed. Sweet is the page that lieth there, cloth of gold is goodly prey. See the black ravens in the air, black, oh black as night are they. What do they do there so stark and dead? There is blood upon her hand. Why are the lilies flecked with red? There is blood on the river sand. There are two that ride from the south and to the east, and two from the north and west. For the black raven a goodly feast, for the king daughters to rest. There is one man who loves her true. Red, oh red, is the stain of gore. He hath dug in a grave by some darksome yew. One grave will do for four. No moon in the still heaven, no water in the black water none. The sins on her soul are 7, the sin upon his is 1. I have walked a great while over the snow, and I am not tall nor strong. My clothes are wet, my teeth are set, and the way was hard and long. I have wandered over fruitful earth, but I never came here before. Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door. The cutting wind is cruel foe. I dare not stand in the blast. My hands are stone, my voice is a groan, and the worst of death is past. But I am a little maiden still. My little white feet are sore. Oh, lift me over the threshold and let me in at the door.
Her voice was the voice that women have, who plead for their heart's desire. She came, and the quivering flame sank and died in the fire. It never was lit again on my hearth, since I hurried across the floor to lift her over the threshold that I let her in at the door. As I went walking all alone, I heard Twa Corbies muttering. The tane unto the other did sail. Where are we gonna dine today? Oh, where are we going to dine today? Behind yon old dirt dyke, I sense there lies a new slain knight, but nobody kens that he lies there, oh, but his hawk and his hound and his lady fair, his hawk and his hound and his lady fair. But his hound has to the hunting gone, his hawk to fetch the wild falcon. His lady's taken another mate, oh, so we may make our dinner sweet, oh, we can make our dinner sweet. You perch on his white neck bone, I'll pluck out his 2 bonny blue eyes, and a lock of his golden hair, oh, we'll thatch our nest when it grows bare, oh, we'll thatch our nest when it grows bare. Many will moan and look in vain, but none shall ken where he has gone, and his white bones, when they are bare, oh, the wind shall blow forevermore, oh, the wind shall blow forevermore. As I went walking all alone, I heard 2 Corbies muttering. The one unto the other did say, where are we going to dine today? Where are we going to dine today?
The Lake, by Edgar Allan Poe. In spring of youth, it was my lot to haunt a spot on the wide earth, that which I could not love the less, so lovely was the loneliness of wild lake with black rock bound, and the tall pines that towered round. But when the night had thrown her pall upon that spot as upon all, and the mystic wind went by, murmuring in melody, then I would awake to the terror of that lone lake. Yet that terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight, a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define, nor love, although the love were thine. Death was in that poisonous wave, and in its gulf a fitting grave for him who thence would solace bring to his lone imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake. Edgar Allan Poe. The Open Window, by H.H. Munro. Saki. My aunt will be down presently, Mr. Nuttall, said a very self-possessed young lady of 15. In the meantime, you must try and put up with me. Frampton Nuttall endeavored to say the correct something which would duly flatter the niece of the moment without unduly discounting the aunt that was to come. Privately, he doubted more than ever whether these formal visits on a succession of total strangers would do much towards helping the nerve cure which he was supposed to be undergoing. I know how it will be, his sister had said, when he was preparing to migrate to this rural retreat. You'll bury yourself down there and not speak to a living soul, and your nerves will be worse than ever for moping. I shall just give you letters of introduction to all the people I know there. Some of them, as far as I can remember, were quite nice. Frampton wondered whether Miss Sempleton, the lady to whom he was presenting one of the letters of introduction, came into the nice division. You know many people around here? Asked the niece, when she had judged that they had had sufficient silent communion. Hardly a soul, said Frampton. My sister was staying here at the rectory, some 4 years ago, and she gave me letters of introduction to some people here. He made the last statement in a tone of distinct regret. Then, you know practically nothing about my aunt, pursued the self-possessed young lady. Only her name and address, admitted the caller. He was wondering whether Miss Sempleton was in the married or the widowed state, an undefinable something about the room. It seemed to suggest masculine habitation. Her great tragedy happened just 3 years ago, said the child. Her great tragedy happened just 3 years ago, said the child. That would be since your sister's time. Her tragedy? Asked Frampton. Somehow in this restful country, sport tragedies seemed out of place. You may wonder why we keep that window wide open on October afternoon, said the niece, indicating a large French window that opened out onto the lawn. It is quite warm for the time of year, said Frampton. But has that window got anything to do with the tragedy? Out through that window 3 years ago to a day, her husband and 2 young brothers went off for their day's shooting. They never came back. And crossing the moor to their favourite snipe shooting ground, they were all 3 engulfed in a treacherous piece of bog. It had been that dreadful wet summer, and places that were safe in other years gave suddenly without warning. Their bodies were never recovered. That was the dreadful part. Here, the child's voice lost its self-possessed note and became falteringly human. Poor aunt. Always thinks that they will come back someday. They and the little brown spaniel that was lost with them, and walk in that window just as they used to do. That's why the window is kept open every evening until it is quite dusk. Poor dear aunt.
She has often told me how they went out, her husband with his white waterproof coat over his arm, and Ronnie, her youngest brother, singing, "Bertie, why do you bound?" as he always did to tease her. Because she said it got on her nerves. Do you know, sometimes, on still, quiet evenings like this, I always get a creepy feeling that they will all walk in through that window. She broke off with a little shudder. It was a relief to Frampton when the aunt bustled into the room with a whirl of apologies for being late in making her appearance. "I hope Vera's been amusing you," she said. "She's been very interesting," said Frampton. "I hope you don't mind the open window," said Miss Appleton briskly. "My husband and brothers will be home directly from shooting, and they always come in this way. They've been out for snipe in the marshes today, and so they'll make a fine mess of my poor carpets. So like you mountain folk, isn't it?" She rattled on cheerfully about shooting and the scarcity of birds and the prospects for duck in the winter. To Frampton, it was all purely horrible. He made a desperate but only partial successful effort to turn the talk to a less ghastly topic. He was conscious that his hostess was giving him only a fragment of her attention, and her eyes were constantly straying past him to the open window to the lawn beyond. It was certainly an unfortunate coincidence that he should have paid his visit on this tragic anniversary. The doctors agree in ordering me complete rest, an absence of mental excitement, and avoidance of anything of the nature of violent physical exercise, announced Frampton, who labored under the tolerably widespread delusion that total strangers and chance acquaintances are hungry for the least detail of one's ailments and infirmities, their cause and their cure. On the matter of diet, they are not so much in agreement, he continued. No, said Miss Appleton, in a voice which only replaced a yawn at the last moment. Then she suddenly brightened to alert attention, but not to what Frampton was saying. "Here they are at last!" she cried, "just in time for tea, and don't they look as if they're muddy up to the eyes?" Frampton shivered slightly, and he turned towards the niece to look with a look intended to convey sympathetic comprehension. The child was staring out through the hot window, with a horror-dazed horror in her eyes. In a chill shock of nameless fear, Frampton swung around in his seat and looked in the same direction. In the deepening twilight, 3 figures were walking across the lawn towards the window. They all carried guns under their arms, and one of them was additionally burned with a white coat over his shoulders. A tired brown spaniel kept close at their heels. Noiselessly they neared the house, and then a hoarse young voice chanted out of the dusk, "I said, Bertie, why do you bound?" Frampton grabbed wildly at his stick and his hat, and the hall door and the gravel drive and the front gate were dimly noted stages of his headlong retreat. A cyclist coming along the road had to run into a hedge to avoid imminent collision. "Here we are, my dear," said the bearer of the white mackintosh, coming through the window. "Fairly muddy, but most of it's dry. Who was that who bolted up when we came up?" "A most extraordinary man," said Mr. Nuttall, said Mrs. Appleton. "Could only talk about his illnesses and dashed off without a word of goodbye or apology when you arrived. One would think he had seen a ghost." "I expect it was the spaniel," said the niece coldly. "He told me he had a horror of dogs. He was once hunted into a cemetery somewhere on the banks of the Ganges by a pack of pariah dogs, and had to spend the night in a newly dug grave with the creatures snarling and grinning and foaming above him. Enough to make anyone lose their nerve. Romance at short notice was her specialty."
I hope that you are enjoying yourselves this lovely, fine evening. Putting on this show is always rather nerve-wracking. event. And it's true that nervous I had been and am very, very dreadfully nervous. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was my sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and earth, and I heard many things in hell. But how then am I mad? Hearken and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my mind, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold, I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had a pale blue eye, the eye of a vulture with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now, this is the point. You fancy me mad, but madmen know nothing. You should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, how with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than in the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I'd made an opening sufficient for my head, I would put a dark lantern in, all closed up tight so that no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay on his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single ray of light fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight, but I found the eye always closed. And so it was impossible to do the deed and do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, and calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he passed the night. So you see, he would have had to have been a very profound old man, indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Now, upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more slowly than to mine, more quickly than to mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and him never even to dream of my secret thoughts and deeds. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And suddenly, perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed as if startled. Now, you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, and with the thick darkness, for the shutters were close drawn for fear of robbers, I knew he could not see the opening of the door. And I kept pushing it on, steadily. And I had my head in, and I was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in the bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed, listening, just as I've done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh, no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and I pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise, when he had turned on the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, it is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. Or it is merely a cricket, which has made but a single chirp. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had enveloped the victim with its black shadow, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a little, very, very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple, dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot from out of the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open. And I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled my very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct right on that very damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury as the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier into courage, but even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern, motionless. I tried how steadily I could to maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder every moment. Do you mark me well that I have told you that I am nervous? And so I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come, and with a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once only. And in an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled, gaily, to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. Now, if you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions that I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scantlings. And then I replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. The tub had caught it all. And when I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still as dark as midnight. As the bells sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door, and I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves as, with perfect suavity, as officers of the law. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. A suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled. What had I to fear? The shriek, I had said, was my own, in a bad dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber, and I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of my victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wishing them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness. Until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much like the sound a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations. The noise increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the board, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? No. Oh my God, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew, they were making a mockery of me and my horror. I thought this and I think this still, but anything was better than the agony. Anything more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die! And now it get hard, louder, louder, loud villains! I can stumble no more! Here, dig in the floorboards! I'm in it! It's a beating of his still dead heart! Thank you for joining us this evening. Have a good evening and sleep well.
Thank you so much. Oh, yeah.
He is out cold.
Oh, yeah. He made it an hour past his bedtime. He was like, I'm really afraid, Mom.
You did better with that thing.
Better?
Yes, you were.